Okay, this lecture is going to be a little bit different from the previous lectures because I'm going to challenge you guys to think about some things. Uh, on Monday, we looked at the Punic Wars. On Tuesday, we looked at Latifundia. Today, we're going to look at the Gracchus Brothers. They are two politicians who served in the late 2nd century BC and tried to help Rome's poor, the plebes. Their goal was to redistribute wealth. Now, some people look at the Gracchus brothers as the original socialists, and they will look at them as a lesson that they can look at and say, "This is how what happens when you try to introduce different economic systems." Now, when you're looking at watching this lecture, I want you to challenge yourself and try and think of solutions. What would you do in their situation? Because in reality, we're in the same situation right now. How do we distribute wealth? How do we make life equitable for all of our citizens, not just the wealthiest and those of us who are lucky enough to be in what we call the middle class? Um, Now, the wealth disparity in ancient Rome with latifundia, you can make a couple of different arguments about that. One argument would say that they never solved their wealth disparity problems, and that did lead to the eventual fall of Rome. Others might look at it and say, yes, they solved it because Rome lasted another 500 years after the Gracchus brothers, actually over 500 years. It's fascinating to look at Rome and see what policies they put in place to keep their people happy, to keep their people fed, and to maintain control of their people. Now, let's see. One question I have for you, and a question I have for myself, is can we fix poverty? Is poverty something that we'll always have? In some ways, I think it is. Some people argue that we can make life easier for some people. One of the first things that came up here, and this looks like it's more modern than what I have usually presented to you. I have a little graphic up here called the UBI, the Universal Basic Income. A universal basic income is where people will get a certain paycheck or allowance from the government on a monthly basis. I think one of the Democratic candidates for president tried this out. He was giving some money to people this past fall and tried to show people what a universal basic income might look like. I think Berkeley, California has tried this out too. They supplement, I think, 500 people with a $500 payment monthly to help people with their bills. I think some small countries in Europe, I think Finland has tried it in different regions where people get a basic income. And the philosophy behind it is the people will get enough money to help them live, but it won't be enough really to replace their income. And so it's just kind of an allowance to get them going. The hope is that those people would use that income to start a business, go to school, and improve their own situations. People are different though. Some of us would take that advantage. Some of us are just sit back and relax and take that money. And so there are arguments both ways. And I don't see an answer. I don't know if the universal basic income is an answer. It may be one answer that we could look at. Now, Romans, when they faced this problem, what Tiberius Gracchus wanted to do, Tiberius was the older brother, and he was a hero of the Third Punic War. In fact, by reputation, they said he was the first Roman to scale the walls of the city of Carthage that didn't get killed. He was the son of another Tiberius Gracchus, who was a politician, and so they did have some political advantages. Tiberius and his brother Gaius Gracchus were well educated in academics and also in military science. When they came back, Tiberius was the first son to be elected tribune. And his goal was to redistribute land. He saw the big estates, latifundia, as the problem because the small farmers didn't have jobs, couldn't provide for themselves. And so he wanted to take that land that the wealthy people owned and cut it up and redistribute it. It's not uncommon for ancient cultures to do this sort of thing. The Jewish culture, one that we looked at in Mesopotamia, and we'll look at later on in the Roman world too, the Jewish culture actually had what was called the 7-year, what was it called? The Jubilee year. I think it's Jubilee. But every 7 years, they would wipe out everyone's debts and everything would go back to the original owners. And so if you borrowed money, that would be wiped out. That was a way that the Jewish people maintained some equity in their economics, and you didn't have one group of people to get too wealthy. Revolutions do happen when there is a huge wealth disparity. Paris, France, the French Revolution, 1789. It happened because there was a certain class, the royal family, and their lords and ladies that were extremely wealthy, and other people were extremely poor. Good book is Les Miserables. Jean Valjean gets hard time for stealing a loaf of bread. And that is somewhat based on history. It was a very tough situation. Russian Revolution. The Russians, all the way from the 1860s through 1917, were agitating because the Romanovs were extremely wealthy, but the people were extremely poor. And eventually, Lenin and other people got involved during World War I and were able to kick out the royal family and establish the first communist state. So we do have these problems that continue, and they want to redistribute wealth. Now, what Tiberius ran into was his people that he had convinced to redistribute the wealth were the senators, who were the people that owned the large land masses, the large latifundia farms. And so he never won them over. And in fact, he was killed by those senators at a certain time in his serving of Rome. His younger brother Gaius wanted to feed people. And when he got to be elected tribune, he was advocating to redistribute some of that wealth to these people. And one of his rivals was killed. And when his rival was killed, the Senate used that opportunity to advocate the arrest and execution of anyone who was alleged or accused of that crime. He saw that he was going to be tracked down and killed, and so he did commit suicide. Now, the wealth problems are with us. I don't know how we can solve them. Different political parties will look at different ways to try and solve it. I'm not sure which party or which group would have a great solution. Now, in our culture, 20th, 21st century, United States, I think we're a little bit lucky. We have modern day conveniences. We have plumbing, indoor toilets. We have electrical lights. We have technology, TV. The Romans, they had something called bread and circuses. We'll cover that later, and I'll tell you what it is. But their philosophy was, if you keep the people fed and you keep them happy, they won't revolt. And they maintained that for quite a while. In the United States, okay, I don't know if we have bread and circuses, but we have some pretty good creature comforts, okay? So why revolt when you have a nice, comfortable place to live? We'll see, because we do have an increasing poverty problem. If you look right here, you can see that the wealth disparity is quite large. 1% of the population owns about 40% of the property. Also, 1% of the population has, that's their income. Okay, and you can see that wealth gap growing since the 1980s. And so we do have some issues that we have to look at. What you have today for an assignment is a decision chart. There are no right or wrong answers, but you could look at this and you should decide what is the proper course we should take. How can we adjust income disparity? Is there a reason to adjust income disparity? You frame the question how you want to. Let me know what you think. Also, let me know your questions. I feel like, yeah, I won't get a lot of emails on this one because it is, I'm not going to give you any answers to it. You got to give me the answers, but I'm sure I'll have questions. Go ahead and email me. You know where I am. Great to talk to you. I wish we could talk one-on-one. That'd be a whole lot better. Thanks. Talk to you later.